Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So in my 33-year career as a private school leader, there are different seasons, different stretches of time that I look back on. And, the early years of being an administrator and just, even the more recent stretch of time when I kind of know what I'm doing a lot more than I did before. But, when I look back, there's a specific stretch of years. And when I look back, I remember them as being the most joyful and simultaneously the most challenging and the most complex years. And those were the years when I was the head of school and my daughters were students in my school. And most of you know I have 3 daughters and they're all grown now and have moved out. But back from the, mid-90s till around 2011, 2012, all 3 of my daughters at some point in time were students in my school. And this is episode 109, and way back in episode 16, I did an episode called When Your Children Attend the School That You Lead. And I've gotten a lot of feedback over the last couple of years that that's been helpful to those of you that are parent principals, those of you that are division heads or heads of school and your children attend your school. And that episode 16 was focused a lot on you as the leader and what you can do and the unique challenges that you face, and talked a little bit about your children. But I wanted this episode to focus on the children that are in your school, your own children. And on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss how to help your child navigate being the principal's kid. So before we jump into that, I would like to share another free gift with you. This is a new resource. I'm pretty excited about it, and it is called The 7 Secrets to Improving Teacher Morale. And you can grab that at theprivateschoolleader.com/morale. And I think as private school leaders, we all want this, but we're not sure how to improve teacher morale. And I think what you need is you need to know where to start and you need a plan. And so this is a step-by-step plan. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. It's a lot of hard work, but I really do believe that if you follow these 7 secrets, these 7 steps, that the teacher morale will improve at your school. And so again, you can grab that over at theprivateschoolleader.com/morale. That's free for you, just as a thank you for listening to the podcast. And I also wanted to remind you that, we have these jobs that take a lot. Our schools take a lot. They give a lot. But sometimes the toll can put us into survival mode, and we're just trying to make it through the day. And I always say that I believe, and I do believe this with all my heart, that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And I just want to ask you a question. Do you see yourself doing this for a long time? Do you feel fulfilled at work? Are you happy at work? And if you're not sure, or if the answer is no, or if you just don't feel that way most of the time, or maybe you don't feel that way any of the time, I just wanted to remind you that Thrive Academy can really change and help you not only go from being in survival mode, but to access that long and happy and fulfilling career through step-by-step strategies that can really change the way you work and change how things go outside of school as well. So you can check out the online course that I've created called Thrive Academy over at theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. And then also there's office hours that go along with that, where leaders from all over the United States gather together for an hour live on Zoom every week and encourage each other and challenge each other. And it's the combination of the content and the office hours has been very powerful for a lot of Thrive Academy students to make those transformations in their career and in their life. So again, theprivateschoolleader.com/thrive. Check it out. So we're talking about how to help your child navigate being the principal's kid. And we know this isn't easy. If you have a parent, or if you are a parent of children in your school, if you are someone, even if you have like nieces and nephews, or maybe even just close friends who have children in your school, maybe from your church, but when your child is the principal's kid, they have some challenges that they face. And I want to start the episode by talking about 7 challenges for the principal's kid. And then I'm going to give you 9 strategies to help your child navigate being the principal's kid. Okay? So I'm going to break it down as far as some of the challenges and then talk about some strategies. And, it might be that a lot of this is review, that you already know all of this, but I challenge you to try to view it through the lens of your child, and then to try and implement maybe 1 or 2 of the strategies. Maybe you're not doing them, and maybe it would help. So I hope that you can get something out of this episode today. So the 7 challenges for the principal's kid. Number 1 is increased pressure. So I think that makes sense, just intuitively, that your child probably feels a lot of pressure to perform as well or better than their peers, maybe academically with grades, maybe with their behavior, to like never get a detention, and they feel that pressure. It's probably not coming from you. It's pressure that they put on themselves, and it's because you're the principal and they want to have, you're the head of school. They want to be a good reflection upon you as a parent and leader. But here's the challenge is that many times kids internalize that pressure to try to live up to those expectations, and it's not something that is talked about. And maybe you don't even know that they're feeling that way. And for a lot of these pressures, I think that they really start, in my experience, around 4th or 5th grade. I think in like preschool through 3rd grade, my daughters were just happy to be at school and just enjoying life and enjoying school, and thought it was cool that dad was the principal. But, 4th, 5th grade is when kids start noticing the other kids and how those kids feel about them, and approval from peers and pressure from peers. And so again, if your children are still pretty little, maybe this is something for you to file away for the future, but that pressure is often there for our kids when we lead their school. Number 2 would be social challenges. So your child in your school might struggle to make friends because maybe their peers treat them a little differently, either distancing themselves because you're the head of school and they don't want to be friends with your child, or maybe they want to be friends with their child because there's some sort of perceived benefit from that. And so it's a little bit hard for your child sometimes to know whether these friendships are genuine, or whether they have some aspect to it that has to do with being the principal's kid. So again, that's a struggle. Sometimes if your child is in the school from preschool on up, they've made those strong friendships when they were little, and that's not an issue because they know who their friends are. But different kids come in and out of classrooms and out of our school, and so it's just something to keep in mind, are the social challenges that sometimes the principal's kid will face. That takes us to number 3. Number 3 is fear of judgment. So if your child attends your school, they might worry about how their actions could reflect poorly on you. And that additional stress, about their behavior, and I talked in number 1 about pressure, they're putting pressure on themselves, but then also that pressure manifests itself in different ways, and it can be stress about their performance or about their behavior. And that stress and that fear and that feeling like they have to be perfect or near perfect, that it can really cause them to not be able to relax and be themselves at school. Like sometimes they feel like they're performing to be this version of themselves that is not their authentic selves. And so, again, that can come into play. And not every child of every head of school is going to feel all 7 of these. Maybe you're lucky and your child is only dealing with a couple. Or maybe like me, your child went through and very few of these became an issue, but some of them, and it only takes one of them to be an issue, and it can become a big issue, okay? And number 4 on our list of challenges for the principal's kid, number 4 is misconceptions about favoritism, and this is a big one in my experience. And so even if your child doesn't receive special treatment, the other kids probably assume that they do, and then sometimes that leads to feelings of resentment or even alienation. And so if you think about it, the teachers, it's complex for the teacher to have the principal's kid in their class. A lot of teachers will get that roster and breathe a sigh of relief when your child isn't in their class. And it's not because you're a mean boss. It's awkward. They feel like they're doing a year-long teacher observation in some ways, and they wonder, what is the kid going home and reporting about how class went today? So again, there's misconceptions about perceived favoritism that often is not there. And then sometimes that perception can make your child feel like they have to constantly prove themselves or prove their worth, that they don't have worth just as a student doing their best, but they have worth because of their last name. And that is not a great place to be as a kid, okay? Number 5 can be a challenge for principals' kids. Number 5 is lack of privacy. And so your child, especially as they start to become a tween and a teen, they often feel like they're always being watched because you're the head of school or you're the principal. And I'm sure that you do your best to try to avoid those interactions, but our schools aren't very few of them are super large campuses. You're going to interact with your child even if they don't want you to. And sometimes this lack of privacy or perceived lack of privacy feels somewhat suffocating, especially in social situations. And school is about being social. They might feel like they don't have the freedom to make mistakes or have normal teen and tween experiences without some kind of judgment from you or asking a lot of questions. So again, a lot of these are perceptions more than reality, but they might perceive a lack of privacy and a lack of, freedom to just be themselves. Number 6 on our list of 7 challenges for the principal's kid, number 6 is confusion about roles. So your child, depending on their age, might find it difficult to separate you as a parent and you as an administrator. And it can lead to them being confused about how to interact with you during the day. And that also changes from when they're really little to when they get older. And so when they're really little, they're just excited to see you. You're probably going to get a hug. And those are the glory days from my experience as far as, having your child at the school. There's so many more benefits, when they're younger. But when they get older, like I said, tweens, teens, It might be that they're really, really casual with you in the hall, and that causes some feelings for you. They might feel unsure as to when to approach you if they actually have a problem at school, and they feel like you're always in your principal mode and they just want you to be mom or dad. And so again, roles can be confusing. And then number 7, misconceptions about level of influence and knowledge. And this was a big one for my daughters. A lot of students and some teachers, they perceive that your kid has a tremendous amount of influence over you and that they have all the knowledge of all the things that go on behind the scenes. And we know that that's not true. And so, for example, the other kids in the class, they want a snow day. And so they're blowing up your kid's cell phone with, hey, tell your dad or tell your mom we need a snow day, blah, blah, blah. Teachers want a dress down day. I've had that happen with my daughters, the pressure, from teachers. And then also, if something happens at school, a teacher is terminated, there's some big issue that's going on, other kids then are pumping your child for information that they don't have. And that can be frustrating, annoying, confusing for your child. So, I know I'm focusing on the challenges. I haven't really gone and listed all of the amazing things that go along with being the principal's kid. I feel like for each person, those are unique. And some of them are kind of common, just as far as for me, it was the commute. I just loved the commute, especially at the end of the day, to be able to hear about their day and be present and just get to enjoy that before they, on that drive home. The access to right after school with games or, things that they were involved in. There's just a long list of positives. So I don't want this to be all about the negative, but I'm just trying to shine a light in this episode about the challenges so that we can then roll into these strategies. So that brings us to the 9 strategies to help your child navigate being the principal's kid. Okay? So let's get into it. Number 1, and this is by far the most important one on this list of 9 strategies, and that is have open conversations about the unique challenges. Talk about it. Okay? So I just think that regardless of if they're old enough to understand, and again, you don't want to plant things into their brain that aren't there, but things will start to pop up maybe even in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, but definitely in that 3rd, 4th grade window, in my experience, where you can just start having those conversations and just, how would you have a conversation with an upset teacher or an upset parent who they were, emotionally upset about, something that was going on and a complex challenge? I mean, you're going to listen, you're going to acknowledge and validate their feelings. And so it's important for you to acknowledge that being the principal's kid, that there's pressure that goes with that there's good and there's bad, and to just try to have it be open conversation rather than some taboo subject in your home. It really can reduce and normalize. It reduces the stress and normalizes it. And I think often makes your child much more likely to talk about it. And if they're complaining about it, at the dinner table about, I can't believe they think that I can influence you to have a snow day. They don't understand. Whatever it is that they're complaining about, at least they're talking, at least they're talking about it. And so I think that this should happen regularly, and just to kind of check in and how's it going, with this specific thing. And I wouldn't have that conversation at school. I would recommend having it at home when you're not going to be interrupted. And also, if you have a spouse or partner in the home, that they are present as well. And just to talk about it, frustrations, and then respond with empathy, just the things you would do in any conversation with your child or with a teacher, a student, a parent, but to talk about it. It's so important to talk about it. Okay, that takes us to number 2. And then number 2 is to create clear boundaries between home and school. Okay. And I always used to say that the 30-minute drive that I had at the end of the day was really important because it allowed me to transition from being a principal into being a dad and a husband. And even though most of the time my daughters were in the car with me, it was still kind of a buffer. It was a transition time. And, I saw that really get flipped on its head during COVID when I was working from home. And even though my daughters had graduated from high school, 2 of them were still in college and still living at home, and, everything shut down, of course. And so they're online taking college classes. And, I would be doing my work, Zoom calls and all this stuff, and all stressed out. And then I'm in my principal mode, and then I come into the living room or I come into the kitchen. And I would get pushback from them, and they're like, you don't need to micromanage us, Dad. We know how to load a dishwasher. Because I didn't have that buffer, that transition time between school and home. And so those roles can get blurred, especially if we're at home and we're getting pulled into school issues at night, whether it's subs or facilities or whatever, weather emergencies, whatever it might be. Toggling back and forth between parent and principal when we're at home can be pretty challenging. And so I think that it's really important to just really, really, really try to avoid discussing school-related matters at home unless absolutely necessary. Like, home is for family and to be a dad or to be a mom, to be, that family member, and let school issues be at school. And that's good for you anyways. But it's really, really good for your children. All right, that takes us to number 3 on our list of 9 strategies to help your child navigate being the principal's kid. And number 3 is involve other administrators in your child's discipline. So back in that episode, I'll link it in the show notes, and that's at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 109. At the top of the episode, I mentioned episode 16 that was about, how to lead, at the school where your children attend. In that episode, I gave some advice on this one, involve other administrators in your child's discipline, and also encouraged, having your spouse or partner be the one who's getting involved at the school. But let's just say that your child is in 6th grade and you're the head of school. And maybe you don't have a head of upper school, but you do have a dean of students. Whenever possible, to just have another administrator be involved in the disciplinary issues that arise with your child. And to delegate that responsibility, it is try to avoid that conflict of interest. But I also know that some of you lead small schools and there's one administrator and then there's 1 or 2 people in the office, and that's the whole administrative team. And so you're in charge of disciplining your own child. So it's pretty complicated. And so all I can say with that is that you just have to be really consistent with making sure that if they did the thing and the handbook says that this is the consequence, then that is what you follow through and do, and that your child understands that they're subject to the same rules as everyone else. And most of the time your child wants to be. They don't want to be seen as the teacher's pet or getting special favoritism or treatment. They just want to be a kid. So whenever possible, delegate that. But if you are a smaller school and you can't, to just navigate that very carefully and make sure that they're getting the same exact consequences as anyone else that would do that particular behavior. And so that brings us to number 4, and that's encourage friendships outside of school. And I think this is kind of a unique approach on it, but it's kind of important. I know that some of my coaching clients, that they work at a school that's backed by a church, or that might even be on the church's property, and it gets very insular when it comes to all the families that go to the school also attend the church. All of the friends of your child's friends all attend the church, and you attend the church. And it's just like very difficult for your child to have any friends that are outside of the school environment. But It could be, the Little League team or an archery club or musical theater in your community. I think it's pretty important that if possible, maybe someone from your neighborhood that doesn't attend your church or attend your school. It's pretty important for your child to have a couple of friends that are just outside of that school community. And I know you can't force that, but you can create opportunities. Like I said, dance class, sports teams, clubs, maybe volunteering when they become teenagers, maybe a part-time job, but just to try to build that social circle that's independent outside of their identity as the principal's kid. It's pretty awesome. It's pretty important, but it's also, it's not in your control whether that happens or not, but it is in your control to try to get them involved in a couple things without, overscheduling them. Number 5, we're getting there. Number 5 strategy is to treat your child like any other student. Okay. And so this one, pretty self-explanatory, pretty intuitive, and just make sure that your child is subject to the same rules and expectations and consequences and awards for that matter and privileges that other students are. And that'll help you avoid perceptions of favoritism, but it'll also help you avoid the conflict at home when your child is upset because they're getting special treatment, which does happen. They get upset about the special treatment. Or if for some reason they're not getting recognized, things that they've earned, just because they're the principal's kid, they should be getting recognized and honored for the things that they've earned as well. And so it will feel uncomfortable. It can be a challenge, but it's super necessary from a credibility standpoint, but it's also really good for your child. Number 6 on our list of strategies to help navigate being the principal's kid is to address perception issues with staff and students. And so I think it's really important to be proactive at the beginning of the year and to just be open and honest with your staff and your faculty. Like, look, I know I've got a child in 2nd grade and 4th grade. It's not a secret. I want them to have the same grading and the same treatment, the same, just like any other kid, and just have that open conversation that you want them to be treated like any other student. And that's what's best for them. And so the more that you encourage your teachers to do that approach, the more that they will feel comfortable doing that. And just ask them to talk to you or talk to your spouse or partner if they feel uncertain about how to handle a situation with your child. And again, it's complicated, but if you just put it out there, especially at the beginning of the year, and then your behavior aligns with what you're saying throughout the year, then you can definitely make some progress in this area. Okay. So you're just going to proactively address that. And then number 7 is just encourage extracurricular activities. I shouldn't necessarily say a lot of, because you and your family have to decide what is the appropriate amount of extracurricular activities for your child. But, they're probably going to want to get involved in a lot of stuff at your school, and that's awesome, But give your child the opportunity to shine and to be a star in areas that are outside of your direct control or your direct influence. And so when they're on the soccer team that you don't coach, when they're in the musical that you don't direct, when they're in the choir that you don't lead, okay, then those are times when they can really feel like a star. They can shine, they can be themselves. And so you want to be supportive and attend, the games or the concerts or the performances. But that's another reason on top of all the other reasons that are good reasons to be in extracurricular activities. And then we're almost there. Number 8 is just to offer that emotional support. Your child may feel a unique kind of stress being in the spotlight at school, feeling like there's a spotlight, and a special kind of stress needs a special kind of emotional support. And to just continue that conversation, sometimes your child might just be overwhelmed and they might not really understand why. And I think it's important to listen without judgment, to just be empathic. a no-brainer, but I'm telling you what, it gets harder when it's your own child. And then just to keep reminding them that it's okay to make mistakes. I love you for who you are. It's not about your grades. It's not about whether you get a detention now and then. It's just so important to make sure that we're explicitly stating these things, because we can't just assume that our child understands them. And that's true for anyone listening to this, but it's especially true if your child is currently a student in your school. And then that brings us to number 9, and that is to be intentional about family time. And that family time is not going to be a time when we are talking about school, okay? So I get it that sometimes family time, I coach some clients who, I talked about like school being like the center of everything. Okay, like if you've got 2 kids and one of them's on the soccer team and the basketball team, and one of them is a cheerleader and in the musical, and just, it gets to be a lot, and it gets to be that the school is like the center of the universe for your family. I understand that. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that non-school family time, whether that's at home watching a movie or going out to a movie, going out to dinner, going to a park, doing things as a family, outings, activities, anything that is not school related are super important. And they might be rare, but they're super important. And it allows you to bond and to kind of recharge and re-energize and reconnect as a family when it doesn't involve school. And I know that might be challenging to do, and you're exhausted, and it's a hard thing to plan, but it's super important. So just to review then, we've talked about the 7 challenges for the principal's kid. And number 1, increased pressure. Number 2, social challenges. Number 3, fear of judgment. Number 4, misconceptions about favoritism. Number 5, lack of privacy. Number 6, confusion about roles, parent, principal. And number 7, the misconceptions about their level of influence or their level of knowledge. And then that took us to the 9 strategies to help your child navigate being the principal's kid. Number 1, have open conversations about the unique challenges. 2, create clear boundaries between home and school. 3, involve other administrators in your child's discipline. Number 4, encourage friendships outside of school. Number 5, treat your child like any other student. Number 6, proactively address issues with staff and parents and perception issues just up front, during the beginning of the school year. Number 7, encourage extracurricular activities. And number 8, offer emotional support. And number 9, be intentional about family time that doesn't involve the school. And your call to action for today's episode is to have a conversation with your child about this and just check in to see how being the principal's kid is going for them currently. And I just ran off a list of 7 and a list of 9. That's a lot, and that's a lot even for these episodes. And I always encourage you to be doing something else while you're listening. And so I'll take good care of you in the show notes, episode 109, theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 109. Those will be there for you. And I'll also link that episode that I mentioned before back in episode 16, that could provide some help as well. And just last word on that is to give yourself some grace. Like, it's hard to be a parent. It's really hard to be a parent running a school where your children attend. You're not going to get it perfect. You're not going to get it right all the time. The joy usually is much, much more than the tough things. Overall, like I said, looking back on it with my 3 daughters, it was wonderful. It was complex. It was a challenge, had to be really intentional about some things, but I'm so glad that it was the way that it was. Okay. So just before we go, I want to give you another free gift. This one's called 7 Steps to Having a Successful Meeting with an Upset Parent. Part of our job is meeting with parents, and sometimes we feel like we are really stressing about that. And I think honestly what you need is a plan. And it can go better if you have a plan. And so the privateschoolleader.com/meeting is where for free you can grab the guide called 7 Steps to Having a Successful Meeting with an Upset Parent. And then also just a reminder that I do one-on-one coaching, and you can find out more about working with me one-on-one and help me, learning more about you and your school and trying to help you solve your biggest problem at school right now. just check that out at theprivateschoolleader.com/coaching. And if you get value from this podcast, if you could just rate and write a review wherever you listen, it really helps the algorithm push it out to leaders all over the world as suggested content. And probably the best way to get the word out is for you to share the link of this podcast with another school leader that you know and an aspiring leader or rising leader at your school. And I appreciate you. I appreciate the hard work that you do at your school. And I just want to say I am so thankful that you've taken some time out of your busy week to join me here today. And I will see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.